The Ethan Upshur series, Season 1, Episode 2. I slowly crept out of the library, and I had a straight view of that prick in a suit. His office, Joel Blair. I saw his office, and it was undeniably holed up like a military fortress. Knowing men like Joel Blair, I'm sure he was holed up with his bodyguard, and he didn't really care about all his other employees. They could get slaughtered by all the howling mental patients for all he cared. But at the time, I wasn't that judgmental and cynical. So I trudged down the stairs, and I snuck back into the lobby, but I could barely peek my head past the entranceway of the lobby, and then I saw a whole squadron of what appeared to be St. Stephen's own private military guarding the door with rifles and security guards, and I knew they're not going to let anyone get out. I got to find another way to get out of here. So I went into the hallway that was left adjacent to the lobby. And down that hallway, I saw what appeared to be a corpse, but except it wasn't. It twitched and looked right up at me. This person, I don't even know if you could call it that, was in a wheelchair, and I couldn't really tell if it was a man or a woman. It had a thin jumpsuit on it, a thin brown jumpsuit on it, and they looked up from their wheelchair and they stared at me. Just stared at me. And they stared as blankly, but as deeply as they possibly could. And they stared straight into my soul. And the reason why I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman is because this person was just wasted away to nothing but skin and bones. And its eyes were sunken in. And they had no hair, only scars on the top of their head. And they had the palest skin. I had to turn away. I didn't want to stare. I didn't want to upset whoever that was. And then I go into one of the many nice lounges in that building. And the television set that was on the wall was completely covered in blood. And there was a body that had been slashed open right on the floor. And right at the base of the body, sitting on one of the couches in the lounge, in what looked like a commons area, was a patient with no shirt, just those jumpsuit paper pants. And he had what appeared to be like some kind of bloody shank. I didn't want to find out, and I didn't want to look at him too long, because I knew if I stared, I could be joining the body on the floor. So I ran past him. But something caught my eye. In the back of the commons area, there was this little file, like a blue filing folder, and there was paper sticking out of it. And, me being the journalist that I am, I pulled it, and I wasn't going to stay there and read it. So I ran out of the commons room and walked into the hall, where I was sure the worst of the fighting in this hall was over. And I read it. And it said, quote, Experiment 132, Mr. Paul Waltons, When Mr. Waltons first appeared in this clinic, he weighed about 275 pounds. But when we injected him with the therapy, he grew significantly, and his muscle mass multiplied significantly. He demonstrated superhuman strength ability. He was able to knock down walls and deal with immense pain in an unbelievable way. Research is still going on. Yeah, I was very curious, but little did I know I was about to meet Mr. Paul Waltons. And then I saw that thing in the wheelchair again, and he looked right at me, stared at me for a minute, and begged in a raspy voice, "Kill me! Kill me!" I wasn't gonna do that, so I ran away, and I didn't know where to go. And then I looked across at straight ahead at another hallway, and this hallway was full of bathrooms, offices, and a security office. And I saw, once again, a security officer desperately wrestling with one of the patients. But the patient quickly got the upper hand, grabbed the nightstick, and stabbed the officer in the throat with what appeared to be a piece of broken glass, and he started just digging in his throat until... I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even want to talk about it. And then... a bullet whizzed right over my head. I knew the security was coming for me, so I ran. I ran down. Beside the elevator, there was a set of stairs, and I knew that was my only option. So I ran, and I ran into the door that was in the bottom of the stairs, and it was dark and quiet. And I was in this room with only a couple doors and no windows, and I knew I must be in the basement of the building. So I grabbed out the camera that I was using, and I turned on the night vision. And the camera also had a flashlight I could use. And as I was feeling my way around in this dark room, I looked in the other door, and I go out the door, and outside the door, there is a desk right beside it, and it had another one of those blue files. So I grabbed it and I read it, and it said, hold on, let me see if I got my notes right here. Yes. When we submitted Mr. William into the morphogenic engine, the swarm of nanites came alive, and they swirled around the room, and then they took a human form. And that's how we knew that our experiment was successful. So our $500,000 that the government gave us didn't go to waste. And I remembered the conversation I had with the accountant, and I was thinking, oh, so that's where the $500,000 went. Okay, so evidently there is some experiment that is going on here, and I think they are experimenting on the patients here because they're getting money from somewhere. They are getting paid to do experiments on these people. But I didn't have time to think. I didn't have time to think because As soon as I started thinking those thoughts I was just telling you, I hear a voice scream, "Who's there?" And I went quiet because those hallways were long, dark, and unfamiliar. So I crouched down, hoping he wouldn't see me. And I see a tall, slender man walk, but he was dragging something with him. And it appeared to be a long wooden board with something on the end of it. I didn't want to find out. And I barely exhaled and then he immediately started swinging and swinging and swinging that thing around. And I wasn't about to. I had to do. It was either get shot or get hit in the head by his nail contraption, whatever it was. And I knew this guy was a patient because he was wearing that shredded brown, what looked like an inmate jumpsuit. And he was swinging. And I just thought, if that guy catches me, I might die a slow, painful death. But if I get shot in the head, it'll be no suffering. So I stood up and barely pulled the door open. And then I heard the sound, the sound that I've heard in my nightmares. I heard the sound of, he was running. He was coming towards me, and he was running. And so I sprinted out that door, and I sprinted into the room, and I sprinted up those stairs, hoping to God that those security guards, if they were there, I was hoping they would please at least shoot this man. And so I ran. And for a quick glance, I saw that security platoon, brigade, whatever you want to call it, it was still at that door, at the main door that led to the exit of this building. So, and I already knew what was on the left, so I took a right. And I kept running. And I ran into one of the rooms, and it appeared to be like a pool hall for the employees, because of course they had a pool hall as well as an open bar. What else do they got? Do they got an Olympic-sized swimming pool? Like what? Their own private airport? It wouldn't surprise me if they did. So, and I hid under one of the pool tables until I was certain he was gone. And after I was certain he was gone, I looked around this pool hall, and I noticed that there were windows, 2 big windows in this pool hall. And I was thinking, wait a minute. Hold on, I might make a lot of noise, but if I just grabs a chair or something big and throw it at the window, it might break, and that might be my way out of here. And I looked out at the window and noticed that it led into some middle courtyard. I didn't care because that increased my chance of getting out. So I was just about to grab one of the big love seats that they had in this pool hall lounge. They also had another flat screen TV in there. And then I was stopped by a voice that said, "Stop, my child." And I looked behind me, and there was this bald old man in those brown jumpsuit pants and a white t-shirt. But this white t-shirt had a big cross on it written in blood. And the old man said, My child, you must see the great suffering that is upon this land. You must see his Lord. And I stared at him for a little bit, and I said, I've kind of already seen all the suffering that I've needed to. Thank you. And the old man said, no, you haven't. You haven't. There is much more for you to see. And then, out of nowhere, he screamed, "Get him, Alp!" And as if, I don't know how to describe it, but it felt like the hand of God, or what could have been Satan, grabbed me and it pulled me up in the air. And then it threw me on the ground. It let me go. It was like riding the Tower of Terror at Disney World, only there was no seat. You just fell on the ground. And it picked me up, and it was like it picked me up and carried me through, and it pushed me right through the shattering glass of the window that I was about to shatter anyway. And then this thing, whatever was picking me up, whatever was carrying me, it put me in this other room, and it took me down this dark stairwell, and then it put me through this long gray hallway, and then pushed me through these big gray doors and dropped me over a short balcony onto concrete. And I looked up, and I noticed that there were these metal poles all around me, and then I realized these are metal bars, and metal bars were all around me, and there were doors and doors made out of these giant metal bars. And I looked up, and the balcony which I was thrown from, it also had these metal bars, and it was full of them. It looked like a prison. And then I realized, oh, this is it. That's what it is. It's a prison. And as soon as I started looking around, I see all the arms reaching out of the prison cells, and they were screaming, blood-curdling screams. And I knew I had to record all this. I had to record the prison that these guys were staying in, because the employees, they had access to pool halls, to bars, to television lounges, to video games, to free housing. But these prisoners, I found out later that all of these guys aren't even prisoners. They were people with mental illnesses. They were trapped in these concrete rooms with bars, with metal prison bars surrounding them, so they couldn't get out. And they had to sleep on the ground with piles of cotton for a bed and a hole in the ground for a toilet. And that's all they had in their cells. And I don't even know how long they had to stay in there. And I could have felt sorry for them, but I was just so afraid. So much was going through my mind. I had to get out. So that's what I did. I looked, and I saw a set of stairs, and I walked back up those stairs, back into the long gray hallway with the big doors. And I looked around, And I noticed that one of the rooms in this big gray hallway was not a break room, surprisingly, but it looked like it was some sort of office, but office that they kept records. And one of the records, well, it wasn't like a vinyl record, but it was another one of those blue folders. And I picked that up, and it said the following, quote, "We have 46 more potential surrogates for our experiments. And we have access to more. We can get more by just asking the government to send us more disabled people. And the best part is we have found a way to keep them alive as cheaply as possible while we get all the money. Signed, your loving accountant, Richard Tony." And I had to look through what I had just read, and it basically said that these guys were not only getting money from the government, they were also getting money from the victims' families in medical bills. And they were keeping them alive as cheaply as possible while they got to live in luxury. All the fear turned to anger and disgust. Now I knew all the squalor that these people were living in. But the sad part is, I didn't know if I was going to be able to get them out. But I am going to tell the world, which is why I'm telling you right now. So I walked out of there. And I noticed a room that said showers. And I couldn't tell you why I went in there, but I did. I just wanted to see, did they actually give these people showers? And I looked in there, and it turns out, yeah, they do. Because the shower heads, they do work. But I noticed that there were a lot of what appeared to be wheelchairs with restraints in them. And beside these wheelchairs were what appeared to be little toolboxes. And I wish I hadn't looked in those toolboxes, because the toolboxes were full of scalpels and wire brushes and razors. And some of them were freshly used. There were also lots of pliers in those toolboxes. Bloody pliers. Oh, just breaks my heart. It's getting hard to talk about. So I was out of there. I had to get out of there. So I ran back in. I ran back up the stairs that this whatever had taken me in, and I was out in this courtyard. And the courtyard was actually not a bad place to be. It was like a big open cut grass field, and it had a fountain in the middle of it, and what appeared to be a couple bird baths and some park benches, and there were also some stone tables that you could sit at with what appeared to be chess sets. I mean, maybe this place was at once a nice place, or maybe it was started off with good intentions, but it just became this. Now, I knew that I couldn't go back into the front way where the lobby was, so I decided to go into the unknown, in the back of the building. And maybe, just maybe, there'll be like a back door I can get out of. So, I go there, and I start walking through, and it looked like, I don't know, it looked like there were what appeared to be, like, it looks like there were old school desks, and some more offices, and maybe what appeared to be a doctor's office. I don't know. I didn't really get a good look at it. I was just looking for an exit. But then I heard another sound I will hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. Boom. Whoa. Boom. Whoa. It sounded like someone big, really, really big, was moving. And they were dragging something. Not like the wood guy from the basement. No, they were dragging something bigger, like the size of a person. And then I stood still. Absolutely still. And I saw, through my night vision lens, what appeared to be a man. But this man was enormous. He was over 6.5 feet tall. And he was about as wide as a truck. And he had biceps bigger than my head. And he looked like he could easily rip me in half. And he was carrying what appeared to be a body of an employee. And I could tell it was an employee because they were wearing not a jumpsuit, but like a monkey suit. And he was breathing real heavy, like, "Rah, rah, rah." And nothing I could do but just stand there. I could just stand there. And then I heard, "There he is! Get him!" And then I heard the gunshots again. Pow, pow. And then I saw this big man run right at the guy who was shooting him. But I don't know, the bullets, they were almost bouncing off of him. And he picked up the security guard, and he smashed him right onto the concrete floor. And I heard his bones crunch. And I saw the blood I saw the puddle that this security guard turned into. And there was another security guard there with a gun. And he just stood there, frozen in fear, turned and ran as I'm sure anybody would. And so but I noticed that the security guards, they came from a door with light in it. Okay, maybe that's the right way to go. Maybe that's the way out. Maybe this is my ticket to freedom. But, oh no, the night was only going to get longer. I ran past the door where the security guards came through, and I took a right turn because it led out to this open area, and it kind of looked like we were in a greenhouse area. And sure enough, I don't know why, but I see this little old man. And he's just sorting through paperwork like it's a normal day, like nothing just happened. And I just thought it was weird how he was just doing his paperwork like nothing happened, nothing was going on. But I also noticed the big glass doors that were at the edge of this greenhouse. So I go thinking, oh, thank God, I can finally get out of here. Oh, and they're locked. They won't open without a key card. Because, of course, they won't. And then I look behind me, and there he is, that little old man with the thinning gray hair. And he's holding out his key card with a shaky hand saying, "Do you want this?" And I said, "What? Well, that's a stupid question. Yeah." And he chuckled. "Well, why don't you come back to my office and go through a few things with me, answer some of my questions, and be willing to volunteer for one of my experiments, and I'll let you go. I'll make sure you get out of here because they're not going to hurt me. The security guards aren't going to hurt me because I'm a well-respected doctor on the medical board here. I run all the research here. And I've already had several breakthroughs in this place. But if you help me with one last little breakthrough, and it'll only take a few minutes of your time, I will give you this key card, and you can go forever, and I will let you say anything you want about St. Stephen's. Just come with me back to my office."